Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Once again, like Dr. Stewart mentioned, my name is Shaquila Henderson, and I'm the proud principal of Alpha Learning Academy. We are an elementary school, grades K through 5 in the west side of Orlando, Florida, where I service the majority of low-income students who are full of just so much promise. Our mission is to make sure that we are developing and growing students spiritually, emotionally, academically, and just creating sound students who are able to be independent thinkers, but yet be attached to who they are and growing in what we call a spiritual education that is attached to really Christianity. So one of the things we're going to do, I have a special presentation. Some of my students are going to read a book. As Dr. Stewart was saying, my students are Courtney Thomas, Jason Williams, and Mr. Benjamin Eichner, and they are phenomenal. We are currently in virtual learning, so they will be part of a video. We are continuing to keep our students and our teachers safe during the pandemic because we are still in a pandemic. So Source Stewart, my assistant will need to share the video. Is she able to do that?
Yes, you can go ahead and share screen.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm trying to share. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
I just made you a co-host. Go ahead and feel free to share.
Okay, thank you.
We are reading a book titled More Than Anything Else. Before light, while the stars still twinkle, Papa, my brother John, and I leave our cabin and take the main road out of town, heading to work. The road hugs the ridge between the Kawana River and the mountain. We travel it by lantern. My stomach rumbles, for we had no morning meal, but it isn't really a meal. I want to go, or I will not turn one down. More than anything else, I want to learn to read. But for now, I must work. From sunup to sundown, we pack salt in barrels at the salt works. A white mountain of salt rises above Papa's head. All day we shovel it, but it refuses to grow smaller. We stop only to grab a bite. Sweet potatoes and corn cakes that Papa had brought along in his coat pocket. As I eat every crumb of my meal, I stare at the white mountain. Salt is heavy and rough. The shiny crystals leave cuts in your hands, your arms, your legs, the soles of your feet. My arms ache from lifting the shovel, but I do not think about the pain. I think about hunger still in my head. I have seen some people young and old do it. I am 9 years old, and I know if I had a chance, I could do it too. I think there is a secret in those books. In the chill of the evening, I follow Papa and John back up the road, stopping to catch a frog. The frog wriggles and slips, but I hold on tight and let it go when I want to.
There is something different about this place where we live now. All people are free to go where they want and do what they can. Book learning swims freely around in my hand, and I hold it as long as I want. Back in town, coal miners, rivermen, loggers, and coopers gather on the corner. They are as worn out as me, but full of tales. I see a man reading a newspaper aloud, and all doubt falls away. I have found hope, and it is as brown as me. I see myself the man, and as I watch his eyes move across the paper, it is as if I know what the black marks mean. As if I am reading, as if everyone is listening to me, and I hold that thought in my hand. I will work until I am the best reader in the country. Children will crowd around me, and I will teach them to read. But Papa taps me on the shoulder, come on, and John tugs at my shirt. They don't see what I see. They don't see what I can be.
We hurry home. Mama, I have to learn to read, I say. She holds my hand and feels my hunger racing fast as my heart. It is a small book, a blue, the color of midnight. She gave it to me one evening in the corner of our cabin, pulling it from under the clothes that she washed in irons to make a little money. She doesn't say where she got it. She can't read it herself, but she knows this is something called the alphabet. She thinks it is a singing kind of thing, a song on paper. Afterward, even though my shoulders still ache and my legs are stained with salt, I study my book, I stare at the marks and try to imagine their song. I draw the marks on the dirt floor and tries to figure out what sound they make, what story their picture tells, but sometimes I feel I am trying to jump without legs and my thoughts get slippery and I can't keep up with what I want to be and how good I will feel when I learn this magic and how people will look up to me. I can't catch the tune of what I see. I get a salt shoveling pain and I feel my dreams slipping away. I have got to find him, that that newspaper man. I looked everywhere. Finally, I found that brown face of hope. Hi, my name is Courtney Thomas. I am in the third grade. I go to Alpha Academy, and I will be reading this book titled More Than Anything Else. Let's start. I look everywhere. Finally, I find that brown face of hope. He tells me the sounds the marks make. I jump up and down singing it. I shout and laugh like when I was baptized in the creek. I have jumped into another world and I am saved. But I have to know more. Tell me more, I say. What's your name? He asks. Booker, I say. And he takes the sound of my name and draws it on the ground. I linger over that picture. I know I can hold it forever. He is.
Hey. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As you can see, they were reading the book More Than Anything Else by Marie Bradley, as it talked about a young man who had a very strong desire to learn how to read, and how befitting.
Thank you so much, Dr. Soon to be Dr. Shaquila Henderson. Doc students, you have the floor.
Attendees. I will go ahead and start now. Attendees, please use your reaction buttons to thank these amazing young students who are committed to their school's missions. So you can use your reaction button at the side and put a thumbs up. Also, thank you, Principal Henderson, for serving as such a shining light, a beacon of hope, and a wise counsel for generations yet to come. Good morning. My name is Danica Moyes, and I'm a first-year doctoral student at the University of Central Florida. Stories of affirmation are critical in the lives of children. Overcoming the can-do spirit, we fall down, but we get up, are all mantras that are used to encourage, motivate, affirm, and empower. Role models, mentors from diverse walks are so important. This morning's keynote speaker is Mr. Jamal Sowell, Florida's Secretary of Commerce and President of Enterprise Florida, Inc. His vita reflects different passages in his life, such as high school graduate, President of the student body at the University of Florida, Chief of Staff to the President at the University of Florida, a distinguished military career, Chief of Staff at Port Tampa Bay, and he is currently leading in his position. His overreaching message, what shall we tell our children? Guests, please welcome Secretary Sowell. Mr. Sowell, please feel free to share your screen.
Secretary Sowell, we cannot hear you.
Okay, testing. Yeah, how is it now? Is it good?
Perfect. That's great.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, then you all can see my screen, right?
Yes.
All right. I wanted to obviously thank you for having me today. A bit about how I got here. Dr. Martha Lou S. Stewart reached out to me about this, so I know I had to make time in my schedule to come. So with us, I'm based out of Tallahassee, but I was born and raised in Orlando at ORMC, which was intriguing because in Orlando, everybody is usually from somewhere else. My parents are from small towns in Florida. My father's from Jasper, Florida. My mother is from Leesburg, Florida, Lake County pretty much. And essentially, they were born in 1946. So they did not have the chance to go to integrated schools. They were high school class of 64. So for those who know the history, Florida as a state really did not have a massive integration effort to about 65, 66, right after that, which obviously I know Dr. Bracy will then talk about that in her experiences. So then from there, my parents went to Florida A&M University, and my father was in Alpha Phi Alpha, and my mom was in Delta Sigma Theta. So I know we have a lot of people who are involved in those great organizations here today. So I'm going to talk about just about my experience as a young Black male growing up in Orlando, and also how I got here to this point. And a part of that that really will be stressed here is just that not only having great mentors and role models who are here today, but also being a product of the OCPS school system, and also parents who had a passion for education. They may not have had much money, but they definitely had a passion for education and learning. And I think growing up in Orlando, it was intriguing because people were from around the world. I was from Pine Hills. Everybody was Haitian, Jamaican, Trinidadian. And my friends would ask me, Jamal, where are you from? I would say, well, I'm from Orlando. Where are you really from? I was born and raised at ORMC, October 3rd, 1982. They said, well, are you from New York? Are you Haitian, Jamaican, Cuban, Trinidadian, Puerto Rican? I said, no. They said, well, are you just Black? I said, yeah, I'm just straight from Florida. But that desire really pushed me to want to see the world after I left high school and college. So I will go through my slides, but I wanted to obviously thank Dr. Martha S. Lou Stewart, Dr. Slanda, and also all of the great doctoral students such as future Dr. Wilder and those who put this on today. And I'm honored to be able to share the stage with Dr. Lavon Wright Bracey, Dr. Ann Shingaford Butler, and also Miss Brandy Gurley. So it's a pleasure for that. But right now, so we are, in terms of my role at Enterprise Florida, I have two titles. I serve as the Florida Secretary of Commerce, but also I serve as the President and CEO of Enterprise Florida. What that is, we were the former Department of Commerce, then we changed over to a public-private model. So we have public funding and private funding. And our headquarters is technically in Orlando. So I'm in Orlando on a regular, but we have offices in South Florida and also offices really around the entire state with companies on our board, such as Publix, Florida Power and Light, Duke Energy, those companies also such as Disney World. And for us, it's really about helping businesses, small businesses, minority businesses. And I really have a focus a lot on those because those tend to be the ones who need the most assistance in regards to credit or loans. But all of that will be tied into my experiences growing up very soon as I articulate that. So for us, we have certain programs that we do. And even though I may not have been the best at math, I was very good at reading, writing, and also having the chance to speak. So those youth who spoke a few minutes ago, that's how I started. And even though as a child, I may not have known the importance of that, that really helps in regards to leadership, in regards to certain roles. And having those small skills built at that age, I did not necessarily appreciate that, but when I saw my peers do it, and when I started to do it, I began to really love it, which really allows me to do what I do today. So in my role, I hired someone named Attorney Veronica Valdez, who's an AKA in Orlando. She was a lawyer. She also ran a nightclub called JJ Whispers. So many of you all may not have ever heard about that with all of our esteemed academics here, but definitely she knew how to run a business. She knew what it took to learn all parts of Orlando, but all parts of Florida, especially when it came to small and minority businesses. So for me, it was important because the people that you surround yourself with is that's going to be key. In Orlando, my mom would say certain things. I don't like you hanging around that person. I don't like you hanging around this person. And I never really understood that. I was just trying to be cool, be friends with everybody. But then I realized that having that structure, but also hanging around certain people allows you to become better, or you'll get pulled down with them. And then Veronica is one. Her pastor is Pastor Terrence Gray at St. Mark AME Church. So we're really trying to obviously focus on food deserts in urban areas of the state of Florida, and also in rural areas too. We have places like Hamilton County, Florida, Madison, Florida, and areas that people may not think about when it comes to the state of Florida, but there is a rich history with that, because we obviously know Orlando and Tampa and Miami and Jacksonville, but with old Florida, just the history of the state prior to post-World War II, prior to Disney, Florida was a very rural state, very based on tourism and agriculture. But I know that background. And for us, we really, it's my desire to merge my experiences together, whether it's my experiences overseas, my experiences in Pine Hills. For us, we really wanted to be out there for the community, to those businesses that are employing people, because for anybody who knows the West Indian or Caribbean communities, they are very much entrepreneurial, very small business driven. So for us, it's really key to not only be a resource for them, to outreach to them and to go to where they are. And that's very important for me, because as someone raised in West Orlando, I would take the city bus all through Richmond Heights, all through Washington Shores. And for those on the east side was a total different world. My first time ever on the east side was playing high school sports, but also my first concert ever in my life was at UCF. It was a Kirk Franklin concert back in the mid 1990s. So education for us was really key, especially with the Valencia West campus being right where we lived. And seeing that every single day really embedded something in me. So right now, for those who know history, everybody and many people may or may not know Madam C.J. Walker. I really got to learn about her because my mother made us read biographies. She said, well, if you ever want to know where somebody is going or what somebody has done, you need to read a biography, because a lot of that you can map out on your own and see what they did at certain parts of their life. So many years later, when I lived in Indiana for law school, I got to know a lot more of her history, the environment there, and even the building that she has in downtown Indianapolis, right by Indiana University, Indianapolis. So that is really what we do. I'm trying to do all of that I can in my role to make the next Madam C.J. Walker, to invest capital in them, to connect them to capital, to help these small businesses in these communities with the youth who spoke today and those who have a vision, who may or may not want to go to college. We want to give them opportunities, especially when it comes to business. And Madam C.J. Walker is one who is the essential embodiment of that. And as it says, don't sit and wait for the opportunities to come, get up and make them. And I think that having those conversations with the youth in regards to entrepreneurial skills, in regards to thinking outside the box. I know at times as a child, I was very linear in my thinking, but when I started to go to different churches and hear speakers and just different thought processes helped me formulate the leader that I want to be one day. I was not a natural leader. I was quiet. I was shy with a speech impediment. So because of that, I really shied away because I didn't want kids to make fun of me. I did not want to be seen as someone who was not intellectually capable because I could not articulate that. And so my mom had me in speech therapy lessons all the time. And though I did not like it at that time, I appreciate it now because of the confidence that was portrayed. It really wasn't portrayed because of the fact that I could not articulate my words and thoughts and everything. And that really hurt my self-esteem as a child. But real soon, I'm going to go into a few things about how I was able to really feel empowered and be helped through the ages of 12, 13, 14, 15, which are so pivotal for a young Black male with growing up in areas that may not be always the safest all the time, but with having certain mentors and role models really allowed me to thrive and excel. So this is an event that we did for Haitian businesses. And where I was raised, it was very West Indian centric. My two best friends were Haitian preachers. So for anybody who knows Haitian Creole, bon Dieu bon means God is good. And we would say a term called a béni soit l'Éternel. And basically it's certain terms that a lot of Haitian churches use in their sermons. Jésus vivant means Jesus lives. And I learned that as a kid. I learned how to make soup joumou and crémasse. And all of those things really allowed me to be well-rounded, not understanding what it would do for me in the future. That's just where we were raised. My friends would always just talk about the Haitian culture. And I really wanted to merge those experiences. So we're going to do other things such as that in regards to outreach to different communities, whether it's the Hispanic Latino community, whether it is the Jamaican community, everywhere around the state. We want to make sure that we are empowering businesses, but that really comes from my experiences around the entire world. So for us, we do a lot of international trade and development all around the world. And it's important because small and minority businesses who want to thrive, they do that because they're able to export their product and then create more jobs. So we walked into the process. Prior to this job, I was in the port world, and the port world is very eccentric because you had all these different factions to trucking companies, shipping companies, railroads, everything. And we really want to make sure that Florida stays a competitive state for businesses who are trying to grow and thrive. So how did I get here? Is a story that is really one of empowerment, one of a time where my high school peers would have never thought I'd be here today. When I was never really remembered, I was quiet. So I went to Dr. Phillips, a big high school. So 5,000 students. I didn't talk to anybody, but my brother loved it. I changed high schools my last year, but 9th, 10th, 11th grade was at Dr. Phillips. So for me, because I did not have the stellar high school experience, I felt that I needed to do it differently. I wanted to put myself out there and almost, even if it was embarrassing. So for me, grew up in Orlando, but then my dad got back in the Army, so we moved to Atlanta when I was about maybe 6 months years old. And then we went to DC for a little bit, which where I have 4 siblings. And then for us, the reason why I have these pictures, because with moving, we moved to Atlanta to DC, then came back to Florida in 1993 in Orlando. So I was 11 years old. So even though I was born in Orlando, we did live elsewhere for a little bit. Atlanta before it was Atlanta, how it is now, and even in DC. But my mom was very big on us reading about historic Black leaders who people may not ever think about. I know we hear about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. a lot and others, but those like a Samuel DeWitt Proctor, a famous theologian, college president of North Carolina A&T, Virginia Union. And during his time as the president at North Carolina A&T, he mentored Reverend Jesse Jackson, who was student body president at that time. He was a visionary leader who mentored Dr. King, and really his importance set the stage for so many other leaders to then come after him. Next, you have General Chappie James, and with them, ironically, they're both in Kappa Alpha Psi. So I pledged Kappa in college, and I'll tell you about that and everything and how that happened, even though my father and uncle are all alphas. So the general is from Florida, went to Tuskegee from the Panhandle. And the story to me was so empowering to read about this as a child at a time that this is before you have a lot of TV and social media. But to me, that was empowering to see their backgrounds, especially in the church, because my major was in religion. So I grew up wanting to be a pastor. And I'll tell you a part of why that was. So for me, I'm the youngest of 4 siblings. And my oldest brother, he retired in Kansas from the Army. He was injured, 100% injured in Iraq. So he made Kansas his home where he was stationed when he got out of Iraq. Then my sister is in the DC area because we lived there for a few years, and she graduated from high school in DC. Really is North Virginia and Alexandria. Then my brother John, who was a great role model to me, works at Valencia, went to Dr. Phillips, UF, UCF in the higher ed program, speaks Spanish, Portuguese, Haitian Creole, Russian, and he's on the praise and worship team at a church called Church in the Sun of Orlando. So for us, the church piece was very big. My brother was ordained in the Church of God in Christ and now is a minister and preacher. So for us, that was a big part of our life, But the reason why, even though as a child, I may not have liked going to church, it really empowered me in a different way to see different people from all socioeconomic levels in our city. So obviously, my brother John and I, who I'm very close with, because my parents had 2 kids right out of college, out of FAMU. My dad was a Vietnam veteran, and they had 2 kids, and they waited 10 years, and then had 2 more, 81 and 82. And for us, we were, I've known how to cut hair since I was in 3rd grade. My dad taught all of us how to cut hair. So me going to the barber is just a very foreign concept, but it saved money. But also I was able to cut everybody's hair in college at the University of Florida, all the football players, everybody who needed a haircut, who really wanted only to pay $5. So I became very good at that. But a part of that was that our mother was very big on us being gentlemen, us setting the standard in regards to how you act and treat women, in regards to how you carry yourself, regards even small stuff that I did not appreciate, but now I do now. We would have our female friends from church come to the house and you're like, nope, don't go in the room. You better have them in the living room. You're a gentleman. All those small things help me now in what I do and how I move and operate as a Black male in certain spaces. I know for Black women or women of color, everyone has to navigate things differently. And I think that having those role models and mentors really help you do that. So for us, obviously my parents and everything, I met in college at FAMU from small towns, Florida, but really set the stage because my father was one of the first 10 Black graduates at UF Law School. And he graduated in 74. Then he was one of the first 100 Black lawyers in Florida. And then he became the first Black to be a public defender. Now, yes, he was a lawyer. So those who know law, public defenders and criminal lawyers do not make a lot of money. So I wanted to dispel that myth right now for people who would say like, well, why are you from Pine Hills? I'm like, well, he wanted to be around his clients, but also, he loved what he did. He loved what he did. He wanted to help people who did not have the rights, who did not have the money. And even when it was a detriment to himself, he died doing what he loved to do, because he was the only sibling from his family, who then went to grad school, college, and finishing everything. So he was a major figure in Jasper, Florida, where he constantly gave back his money and resources, and a great role model to me. But also my mother made me do things. I was in a mime group in Orlando, traveled to different churches, TV shows, I mean, everything. This is like 11th, 12th grade. And what that did for me was took me out of my shell. It took me out of my shell because being very shy, being very quiet, it was not natural for me to go on stage. I did not want to do it, but my mom really encouraged me to do it. And the guy on the far left is a guy named Justin Felton, who was the legislative aide for City Commissioner Regina Hill. Now he's in business and everything, and he was my youth pastor, one of the many ones that I had. So for us, this was at Lake Eola with the passing of the Olympic torch in 2002, all on TV and everything. And for us to do that was really instrumental in my upbringing, because being shy, being quiet, not wanting to stretch myself out to my shell really helped me with doing what I do now. So you have these two gentlemen, Reginald F. Lewis, Bob Johnson, and also they're also in Kappa Alpha Psi 2. Wasn't even playing, and then I realized it when I was seeing this last night. Two very wealthy Black males. One's a billionaire, and one had a billion-dollar company. And obviously, the one on the left, Reginald F. Lewis, died too young, but he went to Virginia State University, HBCU, in Petersburg, Virginia, and also Bob Johnson, who went to the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana. So these bios that I would read as a child, how he founded BET, how Reginald Lewis then worked on Wall Street, that was empowering to me to see. And even though those seeds may not have come to fruition until later in life, those seeds were planted at a very, very young age. So for us, that was a common thing for us to not only read, but also to really tap into education. And I didn't necessarily appreciate it because as a young Black male where we grew up, it wasn't cool to be smart or a church boy. So, I mean, I got beat up several times. I have the records to prove it, by what we would call at that time, dope boys, drug dealers. But thankfully, even though I got beat up many times, for me, I would not trade that experience for the world, because it made me want to excel in a way for people who may not be able to speak for themselves. So family for me is big because both of my parents are from Florida. I know most of my cousins, first, second, third, fourth cousins. So that's really, for me, that's special, because when just to know your history, this is my father's side from Jasper, Florida. I have a cousin who was the interim president at Florida A&M University, Dr. Castell Bryan. And for us, having that family legacy and history, I would always ask questions. Who is who has done everything that we may not think about? Because Florida is such a state that's transient. Only about 35% of the state is from Florida. Everybody else is from out of state, came from somewhere else. So a lot of my peers just didn't know about that Black history in Florida, about that history in Florida. And I'm going to talk about that soon, such as a fellow named Edward Daniel Davis, who was the president of the NAACP of Florida back in the 1950s, who then led the integration efforts after Harry T. Moore died. So this is my godfather, Judge Emerson Thompson, one of the first Black judges in Orlando. Him and my father met back in the 1970s, early 70s, because my father was the first Black to be assistant public defender. Judge Thompson was the first Black to be a assistant state attorney. They met many years ago, so I still talk to him till this day. Even though my father's passed, he's been a great role model for me in regards to navigating just the world, but career advice, but also the state of Florida. So my aunt is there with the yellow dress. Attorney Beryl Thompson McClary is my mom's youngest sibling, youngest sister. She's a lawyer in Orlando. She married a guy named Thomas McClary, who was the founder of the Commodores. So I don't know my whole entire life. So Commodores, for those who may be too young to know, they wanted to be the Black Beatles. So Brick House, I know for those who may know some of those songs, Easy Like Sunday Morning. And I know I can't hear anybody, but everybody knows this word once, twice, three times. Yeah, exactly. Because I see some folks, y'all singing it and everything. So that's my uncle in the middle, and the having the glasses. That was my twin cousins who went to Jones High School, and they graduated in 2018. Now they're in college at Alabama State and Tennessee State University, even because they wanted to leave the state. That's my cousins, my dad on the far left. And for us, my uncle was a Commodore, so having the chance to play the music, hear the music was empowering to me, because for him, he went to Tuskegee University and he left college maybe his sophomore year because they were just doing so well. He met Lionel Richie one day, the first day of classes, when he was talking about what class to take. He said, "Hey, I have a band." And so then my uncle then started that, and then the rest is history. So for me, it was empowering to see these figures all throughout my life on a regular. So that's my aunt, Beryl Thompson McClary, who's a lawyer in Orlando, very active and everything, and just great role models, but also a great people to emulate for myself. So there's a historic Black beach in Nassau County called American Beach. My aunt has a very small house on American Beach in Nassau County. My aunt, who's in the orange, my mom's second oldest sister, was the first Black woman to be a pharmacist in Jacksonville, Dr. Viviloria Frazier. And that house is where we go to all the time. It's a historic Black beach when African Americans could not go to the other beaches. So because of that, people from the entire Southeast would go to American Beach on Amelia Island in Nassau County to enjoy each other. Dr. Janetta B. Cole, the former president of Spelman, has property there. Her family founded that with the African American Life Insurance Company, her forefathers. So she is very engaged in American Beach. And I was told that she's probably going to move there very soon. But you have figures across the state, federal judges who are Black, justices who have houses there, and it's empowering to see that. So even though it may be a very small area, to me that was important to see that as a kid, going there all the time, seeing figures who I could then look up to, because it's one thing to have somebody in the house, but as kids, you really look at your peers. You look at your peers because that can really make or break you in regards to how your peers treat you. But thankfully, I had some very good peers once I learned my lane. So this is college at UF. I became one of the first few Black student body presidents, and there really hasn't been many. And for me, how that started was just being involved on campus. Because I did not have a great high school experience. Again, I changed high school my senior year to a small private school, but the majority, which was a great experience, but the majority of my experiences were just being forgotten, not just feeling like a number, because at Dr. Phillips, 5,000 students. I had a few friends, but really being forgotten, not feeling I was even seen. And that is really important as those who are educators, really maybe look at those students who may not be talkative, who may not be the ones to stand out, because they have so many great stories to tell, but they may not be able to articulate that. So I did that and became president. But because I got involved in different things, I joined the Jewish Student Union my freshman year. I'm Christian, my family is involved in Christian ministry, but I wanted to learn different things, different cultures. So because my major is religion, I joined the Jewish Student Union, learned different things. I learned a little bit of Hebrew and everything. So for me, that was great, because years later, I then spent a semester in Israel and worked there. And then I joined the Hispanic Student Association, the Asian Student Union. I wanted to meet people, but also learn different cultures that may not have been common to me. And though at first it was awkward, my friends who were Jewish would say, "Oh, you're here. Are you an Ethiopian Jew?" I was like, "Yes, Ken." Ken means yes in Hebrew. I said, "Shalom, Boker Tov, Shabbat Tov." And so I learned that. But for me, it was an experience for me that shaped me to push me outside of my limits. Because yes, when you're the only Black person, a person of color in a meeting, and nobody's talking to you because they're intrigued, like, "Oh, why are you here at this meeting?" But that really allowed me to learn how to navigate, make friends, even when it was not comfortable for me naturally. So for me, this is in college many years ago, back when I had hair. So obviously that was many years ago, but having to meet people, but also for me, it was important. We have someone on the school board named Vicki Felder, who was a teacher for my brother and I in high school. And also there was like Kat Gordon, who was a friend of my mother's. So when people would say, "Jamal, you're not nervous to meet with officials at 21, 22 years old? I said no, because in Orlando, I saw Daisy Lynham. I saw Reverend Pastor Bracy. I saw those figures who were very big figures for us, but that made me comfortable to navigate in environments where people who were older, people who were established, or people who were even famous. So then I joined the Marine Corps after college and everything. And that really kind of really set me apart, because I met a lot of good friends. We had a cohort of fellows from Morehouse, or the Naval Academy. And even though my dad was in the Army and my brother was in the Army, grandfather was in the Army, I wanted to do something different. I was always about the one to do something different. I don't want to be like the rest. And I think that because I felt that I was different than others in high school, it didn't bother me to do something different or get made fun of or say, why is he doing that? Why is he being different than everybody else? It didn't bother me because of those experiences, which really hardened me and also shaped me to not want to be like everybody else. So yes, I was the Marine Corps. I joined after college. I was in grad school. I enlisted, then became an officer. So for me, I went to Afghanistan, and I really wanted to be James Bond. I wanted to be the Black James Bond. I wanted to come back home one day to Florida to have these stories to tell my future kids, grandkids one day, because that's what my father did. So with Florida being such a diverse state geographically, demographically, I wanted to live around the world. So I live in 2 different countries, about 12 different states, and I wanted to bring that knowledge home to Florida one day. And that's why I pushed myself, even though it was comfortable. I didn't know anybody in California where I lived, where I was stationed. Afghanistan was hot, but I would not trade that for the world. So this was a random picture that was taken. As you see in my left hand, I had a language card. In Afghanistan, they spoke Pashto. And again, culturally, for me, that was important in regards to really seeing different cultures, because they did not. So people think, oh, Middle East, everybody is Muslim, everybody speaks Arabic. That is not the case. That is not the case. They do not speak Arabic in Afghanistan. They get offended if you say they are Arab. It's a different culture, because with their culture, with Alexander the Great invading and the Brits and the Russians, everybody else, they have a different culture, different language. And I think from my perspective, I was not aware of that. Even almost a different religion. People, they may have said that they were Muslim, but their type of practice of Islam was really almost hostile to the ones who are Muslim in Iraq. And I had to learn that through my training, learn that through my development. And I think that everything is not as black and white as I may have thought when I was growing up. So speaking Pashto, talking to the youth, which was really a passion of mine and which still is. So that was a life-changing experience that pushed me to really do things here in Florida. So then you have peers of mine from my semester in Israel and everything, great experience and all that. My first time going to Israel in college, again, I got involved because I was involved in the Jewish Student Union. I was also involved in the Black Student Union, gospel choir, but I enjoyed the hands-on. I was a hands-on learner. You could sit me at a desk and talk to me all day, but I was not going to learn. I was a hands-on learner, and once my mom figured that out, she put me involved in different things. She made me do tap dance lessons, jazz. I played the alto saxophone. I played basketball, football, baseball, soccer, everything, even swimming, because I was a learner that had to touch things. I had to see things. And I will never forget, in 2nd grade, they thought I was slow of learning. They thought I could not learn, but my mother said, no, my son can learn. He just doesn't learn like the rest of you all. And that to me was important. And people, and my aunt today, who's the Barrow, who's the lawyer in Orlando, always talks about that. Jamal, like they wanted to hold you back. They thought you had a learning disability, but your mother just had to take the time with you to show that you don't learn like anybody else. You have to be engaged. You have to be talking to people, because that is how you are best able to function. And that's exactly what I did. I have a mentor of mine named Dr. Michael Bowie, who is in Omega Psi Phi. He went to UF, a PhD in veterinary sciences from UF, Bowie State, Morgan State. They're just a very, very instrumental figure for me as a role model, and also as a Black male at UF, not having a necessarily very diverse campus at that time on the faculty and staff level. His father died in several years ago, 2014. I went to DC for his father's funeral. So for me, having those different type of mentors from all types of background. So one is in the black dress with the glasses named Gwendolyn Grant. She died in 2018 for breast cancer, but she had a thing. She would mentor the ones who she thought were doing something, going somewhere. So the woman on her right is Jewel Burke Solomon. If you Google Jewel Burke Solomon, very impressive, went to Howard University, worked for Google, a venture capitalist, entrepreneur, just doing well. And that's her husband on the left and everything. But Jewel is someone that Wendy mentored. And also the one in front in the colored dress is Crystal Cole, executive of AT&T. The one in the purple is federal judge Marcia Cook. Federal judge is big. So for those who know the judiciary system, you're pretty much right under the Supreme Court. And having a mentor from all types, whether they're men or women, you can learn something from everybody, but also they can navigate circles that you may never be able to navigate. So for me, that was important. And she really changed the trajectory of my entire career. As you see the gator suit, that's interesting in and of itself. For me, I wanted to really stand out and show my school pride. People would always say, Jamal, that suit looks stupid. Why are you wearing it to the football game or the events and everything? And I always said, people may not like how you do it. People may make fun of you. They may talk about you. But at the end of the day, they will be saying your name when everybody else is forgotten. So till this day, people will say, Jamal, I saw you 10 years ago in that gator suit. And to me, that was my way of being unique and different, which started at a young age, already being unique and different, already being different, already learning different. And that was a statement to really say that, hey, I'm just going to be me. And that's all I can do. So again, a mentor of mine, this was in France in 2019 at the Paris Air Show, and Frank Jimenez. So all different types of mentors from all different types of backgrounds, because I'm the type of person I just ask, will you be a mentor of mine? But it takes time to really have a fit, to be organic. And now he's the general counsel at Raytheon in Boston. He went to Yale and everything, but very, very impressive. But having those type of mentors from different backgrounds allows you to take the best of them and the worst of them to learn to shape how you want to be. And that's why youth really have to be exposed. For me, this is the Speaker of the House of Florida in the 1970s named Terrell Sessoms. He was student body president about 50 years before me at UF. And he passed last year, but one day I just cold called him. I'm the type of person, I'm not afraid to cold call, to reach out, because all they can say is no. So we met up in Tampa, great time to hear his experience. And he was surprised. He said, well, during my time in school, UF was not integrated. So I'm definitely honored that you reached out to me, because it was just a different university at that time. So again, the founder of WebMD, Michael Heekin, he was a trustee at UF. He is in the pink and everything, and someone who I still talk to today. And also the guy in the middle is a guy named Valerie Raymond, who's a mentee of mine, who's Haitian background. So I'm real big on the whole mentorship piece. And Bobby DuBose, who's a state rep, who's my fraternity brother from UF. But from there, but you have then career mentors. You would then have a Paul Anderson in the middle. I met him in college. I worked for him years later as his chief of staff at the port, which took me to a different trajectory. So I said, having the mentors and friends, forcing yourself to get to learn others. Naturally, a lot of my peers and friends are Black males who like to learn and speak and be intellectuals and everything. So, but I had to push myself to then have others. I had to push myself to make sure that I was making friends from all different backgrounds, even when it was necessarily not comfortable. The guy on the left is Greg Celestin, very a successful business entrepreneur in Tampa, and he was on the board of Enterprise Florida, not even knowing that he would be doing that, which he was very instrumental in my process. But seeing him getting out of the Army, seeing him starting a business as a Black male who is who's a serial entrepreneur, employs people, asking those questions to see how he did it is good for me in regards to how I help businesses.
Amazing, amazing, Mr. Sowell. We have about 3 minutes before we open for questions. However, at this point, we want to ask you, what shall we tell our children? As we are looking forward, as we are considering what is happening in the world we are in today, what shall we tell our children?
Correct. So then we shall tell our children that Florida as a state is such a rich state that people really have to really know about when it comes to having people who are empowering to us, having the stories of Dr. Martha Lou Stewart, who you see in this picture, and her son is probably is the reason why I pledged Kappa Alpha Psi, even though my father was an Alpha, who was a big major role model to me, and that was important. But so telling our children that that the key to success is education, but also learning from those who have already done it, and also learning from their successes, from their mistakes. And that is really going to be the key. But you have to show them. And kids, my mom always said, kids don't have choices. I'm going to make you do this, and you may not appreciate it at this time, but you will be appreciative of the background and of everything that we have taught you. So for me, as I go through all the rest of the stuff, Kia is on this call today, Kia Shafere. And so I look forward to the questions, but also I want to make sure that people know that I am a product of the Black history of Florida. I am the embodiment of that. And I want to make sure that the youth get to learn their history. And this is from my dad's passing from Congressman Al Lawson. And I look forward to talking with you, but also for those who may not be able to ask questions, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. And I hope to see you in person in the future.
Amazing. As a first-generation Haitian American student, I would like to say merci beaucoup pour une présentation très bien. So thank you, Mr. Sowell, for such an amazing presentation. Attendees, you can begin adding your questions to the chat, and I will now have my fellow colleague, Erica Moore, take the floor.
Thank you, Danica. And again, thank you, Mr. Swell, for your inspiring presentation. The first question I have is, the boot camp opportunity, is it specifically for those in Central Florida, or is it open to any small minority business in the state?
Yeah, at the entire state. So right now, obviously still virtual. We have it every other week. And even though the headquarters in Orlando, people from around the state have joined, from Pensacola to Panama City to Pahokee, Belgrade. And we want to make sure that we get to the areas around the state that may feel that they are forgotten and that they may not have a voice. So please go to the Enterprise Florida website so you can sign up. We've had about 400 to 500 people each and every session that we've had. But we want to not only show you the resources that we have as a state, we want to make sure that you're connected to the right people.
Awesome. Ms. Lillian, I see that your hand is raised. Did you have a question? Okay, so I'll move to our second question. What influenced your decision towards civil service?
I think having a mother who was very involved in the community. She founded a group called the Girlfriends in Orlando, but she was more involved in the church. I went to the same church as Dr. Lou Stewart, Carter Tabernacle Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. And for us, having really her involvement in the church, that was our life. Every day after school, we were out of sports, going to different groups. They had like the African American Achievers in Orlando. And for us, that was just a lifestyle, because that's how I met people. That's how I met all the Deltas at UCF. That's how I met so many people, because I was just involved in so much. So when I got to college, people would say, oh yes, I remember you from high school sports. I remember you from church, this church conference. And that really built the network for me to then go in abroad one day, international, and do that type of work. So it was just embedded in me from our lifestyle. So I'm not used to going home after work. I have to either work out or do something with family. And that started at a very young age.
And a final question. How can we as parents foster a business mindset in our children?
So fostering that mindset really comes from not being restricted. I know for myself, I'm a very linear person. I like to get up at a certain time. I'm very structured, but unfortunately that structure in the past has hurt me, because not everything is black and white. And it took me to live around the world, to live in other states, other countries, go to different churches, different backgrounds, go to a synagogue, and just name it. And for me, I realized everything wasn't always what I read. Everything was not black and white. So it was important for me to kind of get out of those restraints of being so linear and structured in my thinking. And at times I know kids have to have structure, but let's think about innovative ways to learn, innovative ways to think, innovative ways to do things. And those are really the most successful in business because they're thinking outside the box, outside of their paradigm of what they have been raised in or what they have seen.
We have one more question in the chat, and it says, how can we push our children to close the opportunity gap?
For obviously, the children are there. I think with investment in education, we have to invest in our teachers, have to pay them well, have to increase their pay. And really, that's going to be key. The K through 12 system is our pipeline. Obviously, workforce programs is a focus, but really, the K through 12 system really has to be empowered, and we have to pay teachers right. And I think that is going to be the future for success as we recruit teachers and recruit impressive individuals to then be in the classrooms with our children.
Another question from the chat. Is there any advice that you could possibly need to or give to our at-risk children that do not have the ability of the wealth of supporting that you had in your upbringing?
Correct. So, so for us, I was involved in the Pine Hills Boys and Girls Club on a regular, because because my mom, from what she died from, she really couldn't work or be active. So for us, programs such as Head Start, Boys and Girls Club, really investing in those, because I think that having not only athletic role models, that's great, and I'm not going to knock them, but those intellectual role models, the judges, the doctors, the professors, the teachers, who are really going to be just telling their story. That story has to be told for that youth in Tangelo, for that youth in Carver Shores, from that youth on Alafaya Trail. That story has to be told, and the personal narrative allows them to understand that they can do it too. I know it's great to have the intellectual discussions, but the personal narrative of someone such as Dr. LaVon Bracy Wright, to me, is important, because that history may have seemed like it was that long ago, but the 60s in terms of the date, but we still have those who are living amongst us who need to hear that story. So the engagement with our youth by mentorship, by speaking with them, but also by letting the world know that teachers are one of our most important resources.
Thank you. That concludes our time with you, Mr. Sewell. Again, thank you for your amazing presentation.
Yes, and I wanted to thank Dr. Stewart, who I'm a big fan of hers, and her son, who has really empowered me in my life. And I hope to work with you all and meet you all in the future as I come to Orlando. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have assembled a great panel who, in their own individual way, will share their own perspectives in their walk to excellence. Dr. LaVon White Bracy is the daughter of a civil rights leader, pastor, and educator. She brings her own experience to the table as a first author, educator, advocate, and historian. Let's listen as she shares her story. Welcome, Dr. LaVon White Bracy. Dr. Bracy, you can share your screen.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thanks Secretary Sewell for sharing his story. It was amazing, and I learned so much. I'm one of the 35%ers that Secretary Sewell talked about, that a native Floridian. I was born in Boynton Beach, Florida. My parents moved to St. Augustine, Florida. My dad was a preacher, and my mother was a school teacher. She was a reading teacher. My dad felt that since St. Augustine was the oldest place in the United States of America, that it needed to be a model for the rest of the country. And I'm talking about what happened in the 50s and the 60s. Everything segregated. We were not allowed to go to hotels. We were not allowed to go to restaurants. Things were really bad. And in St. Augustine, they refused to spend any money in the Black community. And my dad said it had to change. So Dad would go to the school board meetings and ask, why are the schools still segregated and why the kids had no books? he would always tell them that it's not fair. We pay taxes and you're not spending any money in the Black community. He would also go to the commission meetings and said, why we don't have any recreation for our kids. Something must be done. So Dad was labeled as a troublemaker. He was told by those in power that you need to stop trying to make things better because your family will be affected if you don't. Dad did not listen, and he said he was going to continue to speak truth to power. So one day my mother was called in by her principal, and she was told, she said, Mrs. Wright, you are an excellent teacher. You're the best reading teacher I've ever had. But the school board has told me that this would be your last day. You're being fired because of your husband's activities. There was 4 children in our family, and our family was accustomed to 2 parents working. Mom now doesn't have a job. So she goes out to try and find another place for employment. She found a job in a place called Bunnell, Florida. Bunnell is about 40 miles from St. Augustine. So this made a difficult transition for the family because Mom had to get up very early to be in Bunnell by 8 o'clock every morning. She told my dad, if you don't stop with your civil rights activities, I'm going to lose this job. Well, my dad redoubled his efforts, and sure enough, in about a year, the principal called Mom in again and says, Ms. Wright, you are the best reading teacher that I have. But because of your husband's activities, I've been told by the school board that this is your last day. So Mother loses the second job. She's frustrated and she gives my dad an ultimatum. If you don't find another place for us to live, I'm going to take my 4 children and leave you here in St. Augustine to fight whatever cause you want to fight. Well, before we left, things got so bad. The Ku Klux Klan burned a cross in front of our house. And they did that because they wanted us to make sure that they knew where we lived and that they would take care of our family. We were not allowed to answer the telephone or anything of that nature because of the terrible messages and the abuse that the messages that were left on the telephone. Well, before we left St. Augustine, my dad wrote a letter to Martin Luther King and asked Martin Luther King to come to St. Augustine. Martin Luther King did come, and things didn't get any better. We left St. Augustine by night. My mother had us all to lay down in the car, and she said she did that because if the Ku Klux Klan was following us out of St. Augustine, they wouldn't see anybody but my dad. So we left St. Augustine and we moved to our new home, Gainesville, Florida. My mother asked my dad, promise me that you will not join the NAACP. He was the president of NAACP in St. Augustine. And she said, promise me you will not join the NAACP. You will not do any civil rights work, and we will live like normal human beings. My dad was a pastor of a church. My mother has her 3rd job now as a reading teacher. Dad says nothing is going to happen. People aren't going to even know who we are. We're going to live incognito in Gainesville. Well, that lasted maybe 4 to 5 months. One day, Mom's going to church, and a lady stops her and says, oh, Miss Wright, we are delighted that Reverend Wright is now the president of the NAACP. We are going to change Gainesville upside down. Well, mom was livid because she had lost 2 jobs and she just knew that she would lose this 3rd job. My dad promised her that he would take the NAACP presidency for only 1 year. However, 1 year turned out to be 18 years. This was in 1964. Dad said he was going to find out what it was in Gainesville that the NAACP needed to focus on. In 1964, 10 years after Brown versus Board of Education, the school board is still segregated. So Dad goes to the school board meeting and asks when would the schools in Gainesville, Florida be integrated? And the commissioner said, the school board member said to him, it'll be another 10 years before we integrate. The climate is not right, and therefore we are not going to adhere to the order to integrate. So Dad said, fine. So he filed a suit with the NAACP for the school system to integrate. They won the suit, and the judge said that they had to integrate with all deliberate speed. So here we are now needing to integrate the school system. So Dad says, I have a strategy. I'm going to start at high school. I'm going to look for 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. So he proceeded to knock on about 500 doors, asking parents to move their kid from the all-Black school to the all-white school. After knocking on 500 doors, he found a 10th grader and an 11th grader and no 12th grader. Dad was just distraught because he knew that if he couldn't find a 12th grader, it would be 2 years before there was a graduation. Well, I was a 12th grader and my brother was a 12th grader. So I said to my brother, why don't we go to Gainesville High? Dad would be delighted if we would go there and we would be in the same class and we could, it would be fun for us. My brother looked at me, he said, listen, I am so sorry that Dad is sad, but I'm not about to go to Gainesville High School. He says, I am in the band, I'm on student council, and I have 3 girlfriends. I'm not about to leave my girlfriends to go over to the all-white school. It's just not going to happen. So I didn't have my brother to go with me. I said to Dad, here I am, send me. I'll go to the all-white school. So Dad said, listen, don't tell your mother what we're doing because she will not be very happy. So when my mother would see my dad and I talking, she felt that he was trying to get me to go to the Gainesville High. And mother would say, I don't care what you say, LaVon is not going to Gainesville High. So Dad took all summer working with mom, and reluctantly she said yes. And Dad said simply he could not ask other parents to make a sacrifice and he not be willing to make one himself. So mother says, okay. So now we have a 10th grader, 11th grader, and 12th grader. About 3 weeks before school is to start, the FBI comes to the house and asks Dad, could he possibly delay integration of the school system for about another 3 years because Gainesville atmosphere was not good and that he could not guarantee our safety. When my mother heard that, she was saying no all over again. What Dad worked out with the FBI, that he would be responsible every day of taking us to school. The FBI indicated to us we couldn't have any activities that we could participate in. No basketball games, no football game, no prom, nothing that students would congregate that we were not allowed to do. So we understood what the parameters were. So here we are, the day before school is to start. I am nervous. I can't sleep. I stayed up all night, didn't know what the next day would look like. I was ready to go to school about 2 hours ahead of time. Mom got up, fixed me a big breakfast. I was so nervous, I just drank some orange juice. We got in the car. Dad took all three of us. We were escorted by policemen, one in front, one in back. Got to the school. Dad had prayer with us, told us to have a good day. The 10th grader went to her class. The 11th grader went to his class. And I proceeded to go to my class. And I was surrounded by 6 white kids who called me the N-word, told me that they did not want me here, that they didn't want our class to make history by having the first Black in a class, and that if I proceeded to stay, that my senior year would be hell on earth. They spit on me, and I went on to my class, sat in the first row on the first seat. And when I got to my seat, the entire class got up, went to the other side and stood. And the teacher says, "Why are you standing?" They said, "I would rather stand by sit by the N-word." So I knew from that experience that I was going to have a tough year. At the end of that day, when Dad picked us up, he says, "How was your day?" And I said, "I survived." I did not want the other kids to know, the other 2 students, how difficult it was for me, because I did not want their parents to decide that they should not go. So every day that I went to school, I was spit on, I was called the N-word. When I got to my seat, because seats were assigned by that time, I would find tacks in my seat. Under my seat would be dead roaches, dead rats, dead snakes. And there would be a terrible letter or 2 about this would be the last day that I would have on earth. The hardest part of the day was navigating how to go to the restroom. I knew I couldn't go to the restroom when classes were changing because I knew that I would be accosted. So I would have to go to class, wait for 10 minutes, ask for a pass, run to the restroom, and run back before anyone knew that I was there. I had been gone. So I tried to watch my liquid intake so that I could not have to go to the restroom no more than twice a day. I spent 180 days in silence, 550 people in my class, and I know not one by name. To think things were bad, one day I get to school and 6 white boys decided to beat me up. And this was before the bell rang. And I was bleeding profusely. I thought that was the last day on earth. After everybody passed by, saw me on the floor, bleeding, they went to their class. I went to the principal's office, told the principal that I had been beaten. And the principal said, "How do I know you didn't leave home like that? I didn't see anybody beat you. And if by chance it happened at school, you ought to know that you aren't welcome and you need to go back to where you belong." So I asked the principal, could I use the telephone to call my dad? He said no. So this is in the era long before cell phones. There were phone booths where you would put a dime into the phone and make a phone call. So I struggled across the street, bleeding profusely, called Dad and told them that I had been beaten. So Dad came, he was very upset when he saw me, and he rushed me to the only Black doctor in Gainesville, and the doctor stitched me up. I have stitches from the front of my head all the way to the back of my head from the beating that I took that day. So I said to Dad, I don't think I'm going back to school. He said, you don't have to go back to school. So I went home, stayed home for about 4 or 5 days, told Dad, take me back to school. He said, I thought you weren't going back. I said, Dad, if I don't go back to school, they win. And I can't afford to let them win. So I went back to school. And they redoubled their efforts. The students really made sure that they could be as mean and nasty as possible. Even the parents got upset because my picture was in the yearbook and said that they couldn't show it to anybody because my Black face was in there. But in spite of how difficult it was, I was able to graduate. And I became the first African American to graduate from Gainesville High. So my dad said to me afterwards, why don't you go to the University of Florida? Since you finished and graduated from Gainesville High. And I said, Dad, I need to go where I am in the majority and not in the minority. And I need to go where I can heal from the experience that I had. So from my experience, what shall we tell our children? First thing that we need to tell our children is to be kind in how you treat others. If they don't treat you well, you need to be kind. You need to kill them with kindness. The second thing we tell our children, we have to be tolerant. It was very difficult for me to understand why I was not accepted. I understand now, but we have to tell our children that they have to be tolerant. And we have to tell our children they have to be resilient, that when things happen that they don't like, they're going to have to be able to get up. They're going to have to be able to rise up. And we're going to have to tell our children that we have to push them beyond their boundaries. And sometimes the boundaries are uncomfortable. My boundaries were certainly uncomfortable. I had to push myself so that I could succeed. We also have to tell our children we need to be proud of who we are and where we have come from. So therefore, they must know their history. I was talking to my granddaughter and she wanted to know where we came from. And I began to tell her about Africa and about the ancestors in Africa and how proud she should be because of who she is and where she has come from. We have to be able to confront adversity. We have to tell our children everything may not go our way. and we need to be able to confront it. We also have to tell our children, we must be bold, we must be brave. And lastly, we must tell our children that they can make a difference. The abuse that I took, I had to do it because I needed to make a difference, because I knew that there were others behind me that were depending on me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bracy, for such a powerful and transparent presentation. If you look through the comments, so many of us really felt it. Thank you for your resilience. Some people said it was so powerful and meaningful. We can still hear the pain in your voice. I just want to let all of our attendees know that you can purchase her book at bravelittlecookie.com. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Bracy, for sharing your story. It's such a privilege to have you this morning in our first session.
Thank you.
That was so powerful. This has been a year of reckoning for each of us, including children and their families. Long periods of isolation and separation from family members and friends have often led to feelings of insecurity and issues of self-worth. What about the children? What can we tell them? Professor of Counselor Education and Mental Health Profession, Dr. Ann Shillingford Butler, has some ideas that you need to get your paper and pen out for, because we will definitely benefit from this. Dr. Shillingford Butler, what can we tell our children? You can now share your screen.
Thank you all so much for this opportunity, Dr. Bracy. This has been an inspiring share, and it just has me thinking about my own life, and I appreciate your story very much. Are you able to see my slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, so I wanted to present on the Not So Incredibles, which is the marginalization of the Black families. And again, if you have, I can't see the chat, so feel free to chime in at any time. What I'm going to talk about is, some of you may know or be familiar with the children's show, The Incredibles. And if you are not familiar with it, you might want to speak with your children, grandchildren, and so on. But The Incredibles family is an animated show by Disney. And it presents a father who has superpowers. His superpowers are strength. He can do just about anything, lift anything. The mother, her superpower is elasticity. She is able to stretch through all types of adversities. The daughter, Violet, her superpower is invisibility, and she has the ability to withstand or resist certain types of forces against her. And the son, his superpower is super speed. So I'm not going to show any of my clips today because of time, but I'll tell you a little bit more about it. The family, the Incredibles family, hides their powers. And this is where I look at the similarities between Black families and the Incredibles. They hide their superpowers because of societal fears. Society within where the Incredibles lived were fearful of what they perceive as too much power from the family. And so they said, okay, we don't want you to do any of those things. We want you to be humble in society. We want you to walk with your heads down. We want you to be like regular people. We want you to stay with your kind. The father, Bob, wants what's best for his family, but he feels marginalized because he's not allowed to live up to his full potential based on society where they are. Mother Helen is focused on protecting her family. Her children are her primary concern, and that's what she's all about. Violet, the daughter, is resilient, and she's able to withstand different confrontations and things that are thrown, discrimination and so on, that are thrown her way. And I'm thinking about Dr. Bracy's story as I say that. And then the son, Dash, is very athletic and quick, and everybody loves him in this story. Media has tried to portray the Black family and the strengths in light of families like the Disney family, The Incredibles. We have the Cosby family that shows Black families. The mother is a lawyer, the father is a doctor, and the kids and everyone are working and coming together. We have may he rest in peace, I just blanked out on the show, but it just shows strength within, it's not just family, but also a community, Wakanda, strength and family in the Black Panther movie. And then we have our Black family that showed us what it can be to resist society's prejudices and discrimination and still stand up with your head up high and be a role model to others in communities and across the United States. But in spite of all of what media has tried or tried to show us of the positive light of Black families, what does society really think about the power of the Black family? The fathers are seen often as angry, or Black men in general, seen as angry, deadbeat, unemployed. And a lot of what we've seen and heard in the media has portrayed just that, the unjust killing of Black men, just being seen as threats because of who they are, because of what they look like. And oftentimes this is what society sees when they see a young Black man. Black women, mothers, are seen, and you can see here, Serena, you can see seen as bold, but not in a good way, invincible, protectors, confident, strong, empowered, yet angry. And so often the need is there to cast aside or to be silenced because of what society sees as this person who is trying to monopolize different spaces. And what these stereotypes have done for us, some of you may have heard of some of these stereotypes about the Black woman, the mammy, that she's willing to give and never take. She's all about giving, all about taking care of those within her household. The Sapphire, who is hard, angry, strict, bossy. And if you've seen some of the shows that are on television, you will see those personalities being portrayed. The Jezebel is seen as overly sexualized and more vulnerable to sexual assaults. And some of these are not just placed on Black women, they're also placed on Black children, Black girls as well. The matriarch is seen as the woman who is the head of the household, oftentimes seen as the single mother who takes on everything for everyone within the family. Now, Black boys, I didn't put any of the Black men on there. I wanted to stick with Black boys because we're talking about the family. And here are 4 young children who we know the stories of how they were killed in society because they were seen as threats. Young Tamar Rice, 12 years old, playing with a toy gun and shot within seconds of the police coming up on site to where he was. And we all know the story of Trayvon, we know the story of Jordan, and we certainly know the story of Emmett. So our Black boys are being seen as threats, even at very, very young ages. Our Black girls, we have the story of the Jeria, who was out with her friends at a pool party. And you can see the way that she's being handled here by the police officer, full of aggression, dehumanized, because somebody was threatened by these individuals being within their community. Young 6-year-old Kiara was handcuffed because her teacher said she was having a temper tantrum, 6 years old. We have heard of a lot of our young Black women up here, up to 75,000, who have just gone missing. And we have 11-year-old Faith. Her story is about her hair. And I know a lot of that is coming out now, that she was kicked out of school because folks within the school didn't like her hair. They didn't feel like it was appropriate. And then we have over here Sex trafficking. We hear more and more about sex trafficking, and research shows that 40% of sex trafficking victims are young Black girls. And so we have a problem in society, not just with our women, Black women or Black men, but also with our Black boys and our Black girls. Black girls especially, because we don't talk so much about what is happening in the Black girls. If I show some pictures about with Black young girls, some of us may not even know who they are because we see a lot, a different side of what the media is showing. And some of the comments that some Black girls get is, why do you look so angry? Fix your face, smile. I've had coworkers come up to me and say, can you talk to this student, this Black student, because she needs to smile more. And I have to ask, what do you want her to smile about? And so we need to be careful what we say to our Black children, a message that we are sending to them. This continuous bondage, slavery, as we know it, is over. But that sense of discrimination, of prejudice, of bondage still continues systemically, psychologically, mentally. It continues within Black families, within Black communities. And what is happening here, the reality is that weathering, and that is the deterioration of health, particularly among Black women, because of all of what we've endured, all of what society has placed on the Black women. Again, I'm going back to Dr. Brace's story, which is so empowering. That weathering is it's saying that society's racial and socioeconomic challenges are affecting Black women's health. Continuous traumatic stress disorder is a real thing. And it's affecting the psychological effects of trauma and stress based on day-to-day activities that we go through, not just the adults, Black and brown adults, but also our children, the traumatic experiences that they go through. My daughter, 8 years old, 6 years old, coming and talking about her hair, that her friends are talking about her skin color. She at one time had a pencil and was scratching her skin. And I said, what are you doing? And she said, when I scratch my skin with my pencil, it makes my skin white. And I want to be white because I want to look like my friends. And right now I'm proud to say that she's in therapy because I think she needs that because of the stress that society places on children very, very young ages. The stresses cause psychological, physical, and social harm to all involved. So we need to be very mindful of that at the educational level, as well as within the communities as we work with Black families. Continuous stress disorder manifests itself in learning disabilities among children, violent and impulsive behavior. Sometimes in schools, we see children acting out, and oftentimes the reaction is to put them in detention or some type of disciplinary action, whereas maybe we just need to stop and listen to what is going on with that child. Has someone said something to the child? Has someone done something to the child? Again, Dr. Brace's story. Thinking about how children are reacting in society within schools because of trauma that they are experiencing continually. Sometimes it could be just listening to their families who are watching the news, the police brutality and so on. Those things impact children as well. Insomnia, substance use, all of those things affect families and children. And then the other part that I really wanted to stress are the health risks of continuous stress disorder, traumatic stress disorder on Black individuals. We are already at higher risk for hypertension, stroke, heart disease, different types of autoimmune disorders, breast cancer and other certain types of cancers, obesity, chronic fatigue, premature birth rates, low motility, and we have a higher level of young Black women who are dying now in childbirth. And we need to be aware of those things. We need to know that continuous stress is affecting Black communities. postpartum stress disorder, or sympathetic nerve and parasympathetic nerve, that fight or flight sensation is continually there because you don't know what is going to happen. We turn on the news and there's something else, and our body, our minds, our brains are telling us what is going to happen next. So it's very hard to relax. And what that does, think about what that does to the body. All of those types of health issues that I've just mentioned here. And when we think about children, those things affect them. So you might not see the hypertension just yet, but if we don't take stock of what is happening within society, those are going to start affecting our children as well. But still, despite all of those things, there's positive news because we continue to rise. Black families continue to rise. There's strength within the Black family. And these are some of the positives. There's strengths within the Black families. There's strengths through church organizations coming together with kinship and supporting each other. We look at parental involvement in education. And I did a study with a colleague recently, and we talked about school systems sometimes looking down at Black parents because they may not necessarily be involved in the education of their system. And my message is that Black families are invested in their children's educational experiences. It may not look the way that you want it to look. They may not be able to come into the school to PTA meetings and do the bake sale and all of those. I certainly know I don't have a lot of time to do so, but it's not that I am not involved. It's not that we are not motivated and invested in our children's lives and experiences. There's this thing called racial socialization that oftentimes educators don't think about. And it's that other involvement that Black parents have to do. And it's talking to their children about safety, talking to the children about how to interact within the community, how to protect yourself in the community. Some of us call it as the talk. If the police pulls you over, what you should do. If your teacher's talking to you, how you should respond. I just did an interview with a few Black children this week, and I was so impressed the way that they responded. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. All of those things are parental involvement in their children's lives. So a Black parent not being able to come into the school does not mean that that parent is a bad person. They are continually being involved in their children's school. And there's more good news. There's been an increase in college enrollment by 31% among Black children. Completion of bachelor's degrees have increased between 2000 and 2015 by 75%. So Black families, despite all of the discrimination, marginalization, and so on, continues to rise, continues to find strength amongst each other and amongst allies that are there for them. The message that society sends us is, you're not good enough to sit at our table, but you're good enough to serve. You serve us, you do what we want you to do, but don't think you're gonna sit with us. Don't think we need your thoughts and decision and words to help us make decisions. We can do that for ourselves. Just be around to help us do the little things that we want to do. And what message do we want to tell our children based on all of that? We want to tell our children, in spite of what you see on the news, in spite of stories like George Floyd, in spite of folks at school calling you names about your skin color, about your hair or your hairstyle, about your accent, or whatever it is, in spite of that, keep moving forward. Don't stay back. Don't let those words keep you behind. Keep moving forward. Anticipate resistance. We need to help our children to understand that it's not all of with them. Everybody is not with you. And so we need to anticipate resistance at school, whether it's college or K-12, on the job. We need to anticipate some type of resistance, but face it with bravery. Have the words, have the fortitude, know what to do, how to present yourself when that resistance comes up. We don't have to fight, we don't have to curse, but we can do it with strength. Listen to your parents. Listen to your family. Listen to those within your community. They know, they've been through, they've experienced, they've overcome. So we want to tell our children to listen, stop and listen. Our generation right now have a very difficult time with that. They think they know, and it's important to tell them, you know some things. You might know about the technology, but I know about survival. So help me help you survive. We need to tell our children to speak up to injustices within society. There's a lot going on, and you need to speak up. George Floyd, it was a young woman who recorded everything, and that made such a significant difference in the outcome, and also then hopefully systemic change. So speak up to injustices at school and within your community. Keep your head up. It doesn't matter what somebody says to you. It's gonna hurt you because we are humans and we hurt. We feel we hurt. Keep your head up. If you need to go cry, cry. It's part of who we are. My background is in counseling, so I encourage people to be emotional. Let it rip if you need to cry, but also keep your head up and let others know that despite what you've said to me, despite what you've thrown at me, I am going to be walking with power. I'm going to be walking with confidence within those school walls, within that community, within the job. I'm going to walk with my head up high and walk, not just walk, but walk with purpose. Let folks know that you mean business, you're about business, that you have parents, you have guardians, you have a community that's behind you, and we are with you, and we are willing to walk with you and help you walk with purpose, because you are a child that is destined for greatness if you only listen and allow others to walk with you and help you survive. I have a couple other slides, and that is basically for community, recognizing Black families, Black individuals, recognize that there are problems within our communities, within our institutions. Be open to talking about race, having that open dialogue about race and racism. Have leadership development training within school systems and so on. Within institutions, visibility, inclusion, acceptance. And lastly, we want to recognize that parents are doing all that they can, and that we need to continue to address systemic factors within education, housing, criminal justice, and healthcare that continue to contribute to the marginalization of Black families. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shillingford Butler, for sharing your passion and your research interests with us. According to the United States Facts Report, 65% of households with children reported the use of online learning during the most critical phases of the pandemic. Similarly, of that number, 11% of households with children reported no live contact with a teacher within a given week. Research is necessary when we consider the question, what can we tell our children? Ms. Brandy Gurley, principal of the Orange County Virtual Schools, can bear witness to those observations, as she was responsible for an exponential growth of online learners, while at the same time having the need to serve as master teacher as a trainer. Ms. Gurley, thank you for serving as a panelist today. We look forward to you sharing some of your experiences in research in this ever-changing virtual environment. Attendees, welcome to the floor, Ms. Gurley.
There we go. Good morning. And again, as she stated, I am Brandy Gurley, principal with Orange County Virtual School. I just want to say that today I have been inspired as a principal with what were the times that we're in, hearing the other individuals sharing the platform with everybody today has been something that has been very inspiring for me myself. So I wanted to thank everybody for the opportunity to be here. And I am super excited about the information that I will be able to share today. So as we get into or talk about what it would be. I wanted to start off with, in my position, and as she stated, there has been a tremendous amount of growth that has happened in the virtual environment for students. I went from 150 full-time students to serving over 5,000 students in 1 year. So the reality is what I want to talk about of what our children are experiencing. We are in a world that is shifting right in front of our eyes, and sometimes it is a challenge in order for us to keep up. So what our children are seeing or what they're experiencing now is it ranges from being afraid of gun violence, mental health, bullying, anxiety, suicide. And so open communication is a big part of being involved and knowing exactly what your child or what the student, we do not want to not push our students. Their skill set is always still where we want to push and keep our expectations. We don't ever want them to feel like we're not pushing them to everything that they're possible of. And then some of this goes with knowing who the child is, with doing that, knowing that these other things that they have, that is the reality or what they're fearful of, is finding the things that they're interested in. I have had numerous conversations with working with virtual students. A lot of times I don't get to see those students. And I have gotten to the point where there have been parents and people who have said, there is nothing else that we can do. I had a very intense situation just recently that I was able to move a child from not wanting to do anything. The child needs to graduate, by finding out what those interests are that that child has, tapping in, building that relationship with that student, and then for the student to be able to move forward. So anxiety, this child was set up to see a mental health counselor with our district. He was refusing to go back to counseling, but I was able to reach him by having continuous communication, finding out who he was, what was able to move him forward. And that on the bright side, he's doing the work. We're still monitoring him because, of course, these are things that we have to have in place. And then other things that our students, that's a reality to them, is racism. There are so many students that everything that's on TV, there is so much violence going on against minorities that they're seeing on a weekly basis. This increases their anxiety, their level of parents and students. It's not just students. So what we have to do is we can't ignore. I heard lots of words in between other presentations about tolerance. You want to make sure you're facing adversity. So we can't ignore that it's there. We have to make sure that we let them know that they can overcome these things, but that takes conversation. So even though racism is here, we can't stop them from achieving their goals and excelling with their dreams. We have to make sure that, equity and equality, that these are conversations and that we're putting a strong effort towards making sure that we acknowledge those things. Another one of the realities of our students in K-12 is the fear of lost academic concerns. And many of you, I know, have heard that in reference to the virtual environment and it's not good for them. And that's not the truth. There are students that we just have to make sure that we're still giving them hope and they have the proper resources and being able to guide them on the path that's going to get them where they need to be. So some of those things that what we practice are the things that I make sure that we're really focusing on in reference to what we see and then how we manage these students and what they're going through. There's three main things I wanted to talk about today, and that's practical life management, school support systems, and then parental involvement. So when you think about managing your life, okay, there are three things that I think are extremely important and for our students, in realizing that the resilience, responsibility, and respect, this will help with managing. And so when you think about resilience, it's the staying power that these students have to muster up in order to overcome life lessons. And these are the things that you have to continue to talk to them about. Resilience is things, those are, the stories they hear. And that comes with letting them know you can get through this. You can get, it doesn't have to be this way. Responsibility is their commitment to stay in the game. And these are, I give it to the students exactly like this. You have to stay in the game when life lessons get tough, and then provide them with examples of what that means to them. You can't give up. We have to keep pushing. It is your job. I tell students all the time, I can't do it for you, but I'm here to support you. We can do this. You can do this. Respect, the way you treat yourself and others when life lessons kick your butt, and especially when no one's watching. That's important for a student to realize, that things are important even when somebody's not watching. That builds character. It helps them get through these other things. So here are some quotes that I think are very impactful and powerful in reference to resilience. I won't read all of them due to time. I will say that this one, resilience is what separates those who do from those who don't. That is very powerful with students, and saying resilience is knowing that you are the only one that has the power and the responsibility to pick yourself up, by Mary Holloway. Empowering them and having them realize that the power that they have, and that no one, you don't want anyone to take that away from them. Responsibility. These are some of the, and using quotes with children, they have been phenomenal. You know, like I said, there's a lot of times I'm not able to see my students, but getting them on a Teams and pulling up things and having them talk about these things has been very impactful. So for responsibility, when you blame others, you give your power away. When you take responsibility, you take back your power to transform your life. And so empowerment is a lot of the reasons as to some of their reality or the fears that they have, and really capitalizing on that and helping them understand that they have the control is a lot, which helps them with moving forward. And then respect. We know how important respect is. And so this one, our self-respect tracks our choices. Every time we act in harmony with our authentic self and heart, we earn our respect. It is that simple. Every choice matters. And so really them understanding that choices, whether you, I tell them all the time, I can't get on the computer and do the work for you. You have to make the choice that you're going to do that. So let's talk about, and let me help and support and guide you on what that looks like and how we do this in order to get through. So that is very important. And then when we talk about the school support systems, there are things as a whole in reference to our students and wanting them to be successful in any environment, but particularly from this virtual environment with things that have changed so much. It's important that they know that they are supported. And it's important that anybody who is involved with supporting the student knows that they need to support and what that looks like. So virtual education has been a hot topic, and navigating that paradigm shift has been something that has been looked at all different levels. I will tell you that there's all different types of virtual methods, whether it's hybrid, whether 100% virtual. It takes, you really have to look into what's best for the student. There's a lot of conversations this year. You know, students had a choice of going back face-to-face, whether they were integrating where, you know, some of them went part of the day. Or you could be 100% virtual. It takes conversations and then tuning into what's best for that student. There's so many myths out there that virtual is not a good, that's not the truth. It just is honing in on what's best for the student and making sure that the appropriate support processes that are there in place. Even in the virtual environment, I will tell you that these are some of the support systems that we have. Small group instruction is very important, whether that be that you individualize in the virtual environment. It is very individualized, tuning into that individual student, taking that student and putting them in a small group, but making sure those are live lessons. You can get on Teams, you can be on Zoom, doing things that are really going to make sure you're benefiting that individual student. So MTSS, which stands for, many of you are education majors that are here that know that it is the multi-tiered system support is what that is. And so if there are individuals that are at different levels, you want to make sure that those different support structures are in place in order to support them. Tutoring is something that is very, it's something that's been rising, especially for the virtual environment. We have virtual tutors that are, I can even, there's agencies, there's face-to-face you can do with live lessons. So it's having a myriad of being able to use a multi system with all of those. And then supporting our ESE students, and those are exceptional students education, our ELL students, which those are English language learners, where English may not be a first language for them. Having those support systems in place are very important, safe referrals. And these are students which I spoke about in the beginning with may be suffering from anxiety, mental health, making sure that there are appropriate procedures and processes in place to be able to support those. Social emotional learning is a huge part. The SEL is something that all schools, and specifically in the virtual environment for students who are not working in the face-to-face, and even if they are, there has been a strong emphasis on those. And here, whenever you look at this, engaging students in social emotional learning, it's important. It takes an academic learning a step further, helping students as a whole develop, as we talked in the beginning, their resilience in facing adversity. This is something that we want to capitalize on that has been very effective in specifically in my virtual school. Self-management, social awareness, relationships, decision-making, and self-awareness. And then why do you have social emotional? Like I said, it is something where it's increasing the self-confidence, that empowerment that they need. Students are having better attitudes. They're feeling like they're able to deal with things more. Due to time, I will not show the presentation, but my particular school, we did a huge presentation on social emotional and the effectiveness and the different things. And the link is there, but I won't be able to show it to you all. But just knowing that even still in the virtual environment, the things that are going on that would have been going on face-to-face are still the things that are happening within the virtual environment. Aggressive behavior, these are the things when we looked at statistics and the research on what it's doing to reduce, what things are happening, what are we seeing? The emotional distress is being limited. The behavioral challenges that some students were having, those are decreasing. So it definitely has been beneficial. And then when we talk about parental involvement, here is, we know that parents, and one of the other presenters talked about that, it just looks different in different environments for different students, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. There are parents that are aware and are engaged, but it may look different. And so we know that it's important. We're encouraging those parents to make sure that there's open communication. You have to make sure you're talking, you're listening. Like I said, it looks different, but actively listening, making sure that students are having a voice. Let them talk, understand on what their needs are, so then we know how to make sure that we are working to address whatever that is that they need. So children, and looking at when these things are happening, having a conscious and intentional in their response. These are things that when parents are doing that, the children, you see higher grades and test scores. You see them being much more productive. Their self-confidence is higher. They have better social skills in the classroom. So them as a whole, their self-esteem, are things that are really capitalized on, that we are capitalizing on, and students are really benefiting from in reference to the support that they're getting. Their behavioral issues are things that you see that on the other side. So those are things that when I think about, just in closing, as to what shall we tell our children, it is definitely that stay moving forward. You are empowered by your own power, but making sure that they are not giving up. They are staying in the game with being resilient, responsible, and respectful.
Thank you, Dr. Gurley, for sharing your experiences of how we can better serve our students in a virtual environment. Attendees, please help us thank all of our panelists that have been able to join us today for this amazing presentation. We do have time for a few comments and questions. We will now open the floor for a Q&A session with Erica. Please feel free to place your questions in the chat box below.
Danica. I have a question. I have a few questions, but I'm going to try to go in order as the panelists presented. Okay, so for Dr. Bracy, we have a question. What will you say to teachers who work with diverse students? What are trauma-informed practices they can encourage or engage in that are responsive to the needs of students who have experienced hypersexualization or other forms of trauma?
Wow. Well, I think we need to recognize that, and if they need some assistance in terms of counseling to deal with the trauma, I think that we need to make sure that that's available to them, because I do believe that there are a number of students that may have experienced trauma. They may not have had the type of trauma that I have had, but they may have had other traumas. And if they need to have some special attention, hopefully the teachers can recognize that and make sure that that's available to them. And then understand that and how they deal with the kids. So often we think that it's a discipline problem, and really it's not a discipline problem. It's an underlying problem that reflects that it looks like a discipline problem. So our teachers need to be skilled enough to recognize what the real problem is and search for an answer so that that student can have what they need to be successful.
Dr. Shillingford Butler, we also wanted to ask you the same question.
Erica, could you repeat the question, please?
I sure can. What will you say to teachers who work with diverse students? What are trauma-informed practices they can engage in that are responsive to the needs of students who have experienced hypersexualization or other forms of trauma?
I definitely think one is developing rapport at the emotional level and the psychological level. So it's one thing to have the academic benchmarks that we need to address, but we also need to build that social relationship, social connections with children so that they feel comfortable enough to share their stories with the educators, with us. And in doing so, we were able to find out more about what they're experiencing. I believe Dr. Bracy mentioned mental health counseling. We do have school counselors in schools. We have school psychologists in schools. So you don't have to go very far to address trauma with children. You have the resources, you have personnel in school who are trained to address those needs. So utilize them, pull them into the leadership team at your schools and have those conversations. But I also want to add that we should not do it alone as educators. Bring the family into the picture. It needs to be a collaborative effort whenever we talk about addressing the needs of the children. So try to connect the family, find out what's happening. Dr. Gurley talked about social emotional learning. We can also learn from parents about what social emotional is at home, what it looks like at home, what works at home that we can use within the school. So building those connections with home, school, and community could definitely work to address the needs of children.
Thank you. We have a question for Ms. Gurley. We know the next year, the focus for schools, both in person and virtually, will recover. recovery for the lost year. Can you speak more to what you envision the role of virtual education and supporting students with high intensity needs in making learning gains in the effort to reduce any gaps or learning loss that may have occurred due to the pandemic?
Yes, great question. And it is definitely something that stays up in the high alert in reference to our students. So one of the main things or the conversations that are happening now is, first and foremost, it's to recognize it, that you have to make sure that you address it. And so support is going to be a huge factor with that, tapping into exactly where they are and then making sure that those appropriate support procedures that are there. It's a mindset shift. You have to be able to have a mindset of whoever is servicing and coming together to collaborate about what needs to happen, that what happens in the classroom can definitely happen in the virtual environment. Now, the trick to this is the other conversations about building the relationships. I'll tell you, virtual teachers have to work extremely hard, but it is important that they are building relationships with those parents and the students, because see, research says it's not a student who is depending on what their IQ is as to how successful they are in the virtual environment. It's the motivation. So if you can tap into the child's motivation, then those gaps are going to be decreasing, but you got to build a relationship and get to know these students to tap into what their individual needs are and then capitalize on what those needs are. You can't just go into it as any normal. You have to figure out this individual student needs this individual student needs this individual student needs this. And that's the challenge, but that's what's going to narrow the gaps, because then you know exactly what that student needs and what you have to put in place and what support systems have to be there in order to reach the student. You can't see them as a whole. They have to be seen individually.
That's awesome. I have another question for you. Given the trauma some of our students have experienced and the continued social isolation of our students during the past year, how do we support the social emotional learning for students in the virtual environment?
You have to make sure the social emotional, it is, and you know, interesting enough, every opportunity that we get, that my teachers, I am talking about it to them on a daily basis. We are having information sessions. We are engaging parents. It takes everybody. So parents need to be made aware of, because what we're doing in the virtual environment and what we're trying to tap onto, we want parents to be educated as well and doing some of those things as well. But it has to be talked about and on a consistent basis, everything. Whenever I tell my teachers on every aspect of what you're doing, we are training our teachers, we're making them aware, then they are trickling down to making sure that their students, as a school, we are engaging teachers and parents, because basically on all ends and all aspects, you have to keep reinforcing, keep talking about, keep implementing, and making sure that these things are happening with SEL, with the social emotional part.
Thank you, Ms. Gurley. I have another question for Dr. Bracy. We know our students continue to experience marginalization in our schools. How do we continue to address their experiences and work to improve environments to better support our students?
Thank you for the question. We must really recognize the differences in the environment of our students, and we must motivate them to let them know that they can be anything that they want to be. We need to continue to have that, as it needs to be the sermon. Regardless to where you have come from, regardless to what your experiences are, you can be the best of everything. And I think some of our students, where they may hear that the most, should be at school, because sometimes they don't hear it at home. So we need to continue to sound like a broken record and letting students know that you can do it, you have the ability to do it, and you can be the very best that you want to be. You can be the president of any company if that's what you want to do. You have to work hard for it. It's not going to be easy, but you are capable of doing it. And I think that we just have to, we have to do that. We have to work extra hard to make people know what their talents are, bring those talents out, and let them know that success belongs to you.
That was awesome. Thank you. We have the second question. Well, you kind of answered it, but I'll ask it anyway. With our children, we talk about adverse child experiences. What about the children who experience trauma on a daily basis? What can we tell them as a village?
Okay, you know, I wrote my book, Brave Little Cookie, because I wanted kids to know that bullying didn't just start. Bullying has been a part of the educational process for a long time. And I think that I was bullied daily, but it's a mindset too. You are going to have to be able to tell yourself that I'm going to be resilient, that I'm going to get through this. I am not going to allow this experience to determine where I will wind up. And I think we have to tell kids the choices that you have to make. You know, in my experience, I had a choice. I had to either graduate or not graduate and fail. I didn't, you know, there were only two choices. And so when students know that they're going to have to look at what their choices are and make the better choice for themselves so that they can be successful.
Thank you. I think that is all the questions I have from the chat. Do anyone have any additional questions?
We would like to invite any of our attendees at this point to unmute and ask any questions.
I have a question, please. And my question is to the panelists. What about the children who are afraid to even go to school now because of the current climate? Either from a social, emotional, educational, or the like.
I would first say that it's important to find out what the fears or anxieties are related to that resistance to go back to school. And that conversation needs to be held between school and family working together to support the children. It's also important to determine the child's level of readiness. So we've gone through a lot over the last 15 months. And to rush a child to go back to school, if they're not psychologically ready, can be harmful to them. A child who has A's and B's, but is affected psychologically, that is harmful. And it's going to impact their ability to do the academic work that they need to do. So I think really working with the anxieties that the child has experienced, whether it's encouraging the family to seek psychological services. There are many counselors right now who are offering telehealth services, so you don't have to go into an office. And we can tap into those services or encourage families to tap into those services, but work with children because that trauma can be very harmful, not just now, but in the long term. So we want to address that trauma now in present moment to support children and also families. And so if you have a child who has that anxiety, that parent might also have some anxiety about what's going on too. So the school really needs to reach out to that family to support them.
May I expand on that, please? I'm just talking about the child who's bullied on a daily basis, even before the pandemic. So how do we make schools safe for children?
That's a very good addition to that question. I think that, schools really need to assess the climate within the school. Part of Dr. Bracey's story she mentioned is when she went to, I believe it's the principal who said, something to the effect of, you might have come into school with it, indicating that that might have happened at home. And so I think the school really needs to address their own perception of how students experience school, what the climate is like within the school, and address things that needs to be changed. What are the teachers' perception of certain children, certain populations, certain communities, and how does that perception impact their relationship with the children? So having dialogue within the school with teachers and staff about the climate, I think needs to be first and foremost. What are your thoughts about bullying within the school? What are your thoughts about bullying Black children? What are your thoughts about bullying children from LGBTQ communities? And really talk about what our own adult perceptions and beliefs are, and really become aware of those beliefs. And then when we're able to work with ourselves as adults, then we'll be ready to support children. But if we have that barrier, that self barrier, that we're sort of hiding our own beliefs, that, I don't really like this folks, but because I need my job, I'm just going to tolerate them. That's not going to be helpful to children. So we need to address the systemic issues within the school community first, and then reach out to the families and talk about what that means. Talk about the holistic child. Somebody mentioned in there that we have to address the whole child. So that bullying comes in, it affects the academic, it affects the emotional, it affects the social, it affects the mental, it affects the spiritual growth of the child. So we need to take that holistic approach as a school. But I think we as adults need to check on self first before we can support children.
I have one question. Social emotional learning is an integral part of my forthgoing research as a doctoral student. And so I'm curious as to how we can implement social emotional learning for the teachers, since they're specifically the ones who are expected to teach these skills to the students. So I'm really curious as to what everybody's thoughts are as far as implementing social emotional skills for the teachers and what that looks like.
So I'll just speak briefly in reference to from a principal's perspective and the expectation that I have in reference to my teachers, making sure that it starts with making sure that they understand we have to, the climate, the culture, that this is what we're going to do and this is what we have. So I am an individual or an administrator that believes it starts from the top. So making sure that I am acknowledging that them within themselves, I have done numerous trainings on what is social emotional, what it looks like from their perspective, making sure they understand as individuals, it's important for them to, for me to acknowledge that the social emotional and the mental part of what they need to do for their job as an individual, and then talk about what it looks like in training them and having conversations. And we have done scenarios. We have gotten together where I have them in small groups. We do specific situations. We get into professional learning groups where we're in smaller groups. They talk about the different things that are happening. My teachers are virtual, so they have to get together and talk to other teachers about what somebody else is seeing. What are you experiencing? And then they as a group, as teachers, start talking about what are these strategies? What are these things that you're doing? What are you doing in your classroom? Are you presenting it just as a slide? Are you guys having a collaborative conversation? Are you showing videos? What are you doing? But they have to incorporate some type of social emotional learning. This is something that should be, because I believe that if you create the climate and the culture where it's an expectation and students know that you're maximizing on it, and it just becomes like learned behavior. So what has happened this particular year, we put a strong emphasis on that. I have had our teachers talk to those students. It starts with building the relationships. They come and tell them things that their parents haven't even known yet. So then we have to call the parents in and we have to make sure, but we're tapping onto things that I don't think would have maybe come out, but it was important to me because when the research was showing that so many of these students were having mental things, but when they're in the virtual environment, unless you're talking to them, I thought, how am I going to know if these students are suffering from them? I have to train my teachers and make them feel confident about addressing social and emotional. And then once they find out something, what to do next. And so that is really the professional development and the things that we have done as a school has been beneficial and has trickled down to supporting and helping our students, because my teachers feel confident and then they are using these things on a daily basis, which is helping our students come to tell them about things.
Well, I can't add much to that, but I just think the number one thing is that if you build a relationship, you will be able to gain some knowledge in terms of the students, because if they have trust in you, then they will begin to confide in you. So that relationship must be built before you can really find out what's the real problem.
Thank you, Dr. Bracy. And that will conclude the end of our Q&A session. Thank you all for your great questions and the panelists for your answers.
Dr. Slanda, wrap it up for us, please.
Absolutely. I'm actually going to turn it over to Michelle Patterson.
We wrap up today's proceedings with a note of gratitude for Dr. Lou Stewart, the founder of the Third Wednesday Forum. Dr. Lou Stewart, a first-generation college student, was the first Black woman at UCF to achieve the rank as professor. Her research and courses explore culturally responsive teaching and student engagement approaches for teaching and mentoring students from diverse backgrounds. In addition to teaching courses in exceptional student education and the supporting high needs population certificate, she is a lead researcher on a state-funded grant designed to address preventative strategies in decreasing situational environmental circumstances that impede the growth and development of young Black males. She was also founding director of the Teacher Education for America's Minorities Project to address recruitment, retention, and induction of people of color into teacher education. She has held local, regional, and national offices in the Delta Sigma Theta sorority and formerly served as a board member of DREF, the sorority's national philanthropic organization. To share her words with you, my father was a sharecropper and my mother a domestic. Both worked long hours tilling the soil or working in homes. My father signed his name with an X until I was 9 when I taught him how. My mother finished 6th grade, but was smarter and more determined than most people I know. They shared a common rhetoric. You don't have to do this. You can do better. Her parents' support, in spite of their struggle, ignited a passion to provide opportunities that manifest in her life and work, including this initiative. The dreams of my parents and related organizations that I work with in the community all share a mission, opportunity. In some small way, it is my dream to give back because so much has been given to me by so many. Dr. Lou Stewart, we cannot capture the impact that you have made within one slide, nor can we capture the immense gratitude and appreciation for your work for our students and our communities. But with this, we thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for your beautiful words. We're now going to pass this for Dr. Slanda to add.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you to Dr. Lou Stewart for all of her hard work and for everything that she has done for our school at UCF, for our community, and for all of us, and for some of us personally. So thank you. I also want to welcome everybody to join us at our next session today at 1:30, or at 1 o'clock, sorry. And then also, and it's the same registration link, we also have another session today at 6:30. So we hope to continue these discussions. We hope to continue this into next year as well. This is our final symposium, or our final meeting for this year. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to our speakers today. Thank you to our panelists today. And thank you for all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Slanda. Again, thank you, Dr. Lou Stewart. Thank you to all of our speakers, panelists, and thank you for all the doctoral students that are helping behind the scenes. Again, this concludes our first session. Please register and with the link to our second and third session as well. We love to see your faces. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.